Salutare și bine v-am regăsit la Transilvania culturală. Este o bucurie și o onoare pentru mine să povestim astăzi cu venerabilul Jampa Lungtok. Venerable, welcome in Cluj. You're for the first time.
Yes, I'm first time here.
And welcome to our show. I would start asking you, why did you turn to Buddhism?
I was always very interested in understanding life and studied electronics because I wanted to understand radios and did not find the answers that satisfied my worries. At the age of 17, my best friend fell down the mountain and was dead, so I asked myself a lot of questions about death. And then I was very fortunate during my studies of electronics to meet the most exceptional Tibetan master, was Geshe Rabten Rinpoche. And we followed his teachings, and I found very logical, very surprised to see such clear words which corresponded more to the way of talking of a technical university. So then after finishing the studies, I wanted to learn the Tibetan language to understand this master directly. And then slowly I was so interested, fascinated, that I just followed more and more their way of living. I never had the impression I was turning to anything else. It was more like a natural consequence of my upbringing, the same ethic attitudes, but more precise background.
Will you explain, please, some of the fundamental concepts of Buddhism for a Western?
Yes, very easy. Maybe it is very important to understand the nature of body and mind. This is actually the topic of all of Buddha's teachings. The mind is that which understands, that's where the feelings happen, and it is very closely connected to our body. And this mind changes during our day into state of sleep and wake. At the end of life, it is completely withdrawn from the connection to the body, dissolves to a most subtle point in a process of death, which is very precisely described. And then this chain of mental event continues after it has left the body and is pushed into a new existence as a result of one's behaviors, the seeds that one placed during one's life. They involuntarily push us into our next existence, which is not only human. There are 6 possibilities, very difficult, very agreeable. And the basic point really to understand is that whatever we experience, whatever situation of life we have, it is the product of our past actions.
This is karma.
This is karma perfectly. And karma just means action, actually. And so one understands this, one gains deep conviction of this process, and then one is very careful with one's action in order not to prepare a very difficult future.
Karma, the meaning of karma, it's not the same with the sin in Christianity.
Sin is always negative,
Yes.
and sin is like a breaching of God's rules. Karma is just action. It can be positive and negative, and refers to a natural process of cause and effect. It's not something Buddha made in the view of Buddhism. Buddha just explains this process, but Buddha does not make these things. Also, Buddha does not give a list of actions that are wrong. He just explains actions out of evil mind will always produce suffering for yourself and others. Action out of a beneficial mind will always produce happiness for yourself and others.
Could you tell us, please, a little bit about the process of becoming a monk?
You have to find a master that is capable of receiving you. A monk is taken care of by the master. It is his responsibility to care for his mental development. And the really very qualified masters, they can see whether a person will develop well or not. So then it can be an acceptance very quickly. It can be they advise to first study, wait a few years. This depends very much.
Is it hard? Is it hard for Western men to approach these techniques and teachings?
I don't think so. The basic nature of all humans is the same. We always long for happiness, we always want to avoid suffering. And the explanations are very logical. And for a modern person which is used to science and analysis and logical thinking, it is particularly accessible.
Talking about happiness, you had to public talking yesterday, and when it comes to happiness, you talk about causes and conditions. Which is the cause for happiness?
It is not the outer objects like wealth or food. The experience of happiness is an experience of the mind. So the cause for it is also a mental state. And the direct cause for happiness are the positive mental states, like compassion, loving kindness, patience, satisfaction or contentment.
And is it hard to achieve these states of mind?
If one has precise explanations and really has the great fortune to meet one of these great masters, the explanations are very moving, and almost involuntarily these positive thoughts come up. And then it's just a question of continuing, of trying to remember these ways of looking at existence, and then listening again and again to these masters will refresh the effort. And if one is really interested and gets a feeling of this being valid, then there comes a natural longing to pursue it. That's not difficult.
It's maybe difficult to start.
Yes, exactly, because it's quite unusual. We are so fixed on our outer experiences. We think the happiness comes from there. And to withdraw from that, to understand that this will never lead to a satisfactory state of happiness, but you have to look for it inside. That is so important.
And in Buddhism, I know that mind means something else, like in Western philosophy or psychology. In the mind, we have also the feelings.
That is correct. The word is the same, but as you say correctly, the content of meaning is vaster and very precise. So in Buddhist teachings, there are definitions for every term you use, very precise definitions. And so mind is considered an object that is not material and has the quality of perceiving an object, grasping an object all the time. And it is a general term for a whole collection of functional factors, which always happen when we think of something, we perceive something. And happiness is one of these functional factors, which occurs in every state of mind. There is a feeling which can be disagreeable, neutral, or agreeable. That's what we call happiness.
Which is the proper way to cope, to deal with disturbing emotions?
Mostly disturbing emotions are product of one's own mental activity, worrying, of course encountering very real sad situations of losing something, losing people that one likes. So when we try to get an understanding of existence, as shortly described, as a sequence of one life after the other, where the experiences of this life are very much dominated by the causes we have set. So one tries to remember that oneself is at the root of the problem, not the surrounding. And that one can do better. And these negative causes can be purified. So one seeks the blessing, the help of the Buddhas, of the Master, in one's mind, one turns to them, says, please help me. Let me get out of this mess of conditioned existence. One generates this wish to get freedom over one's thoughts, one's actions. And at the same time, one tries to train one's mind to view the world and one's experiences more under this light, not as something that is being pushed around by other people or the surroundings, but pushed around by one's own past actions. So there is more stability in one's capacity of accepting the situation, so the mind remains calmer, and one sees that something can be done. So one recites prayers, invocations of the Buddhas, and remembers that the antidote for all the negative experiences is the development of precious positive attitudes of mind, like compassion, loving kindness. So one remembers that all other beings are in the same difficulty. One generates a true wish that oneself and all the others may attain a freedom from that. One kind of identifies with the rest of the world and doesn't feel so alone anymore. So these are the ways we try to cope with.
I think here is an important thing to point. This is, the world is an illusion. Could you explain it a little bit? There is something out there, but important is our projection to that world.
That is very true. Whenever we look at something, perceive something, there is perception, no doubt, like we see a person. But immediately there comes an activity of mind which is very subtle, not kind of graspable by our observing, which is an effects that come out of the past, which will see something in the person, and this is a pure projection. For example, some people that you meet, maybe yourself, you feel very close to, say, oh, that's such a nice person. And maybe your company has completely different reaction. This shows that each one has his own personal projections. So this we try to become aware of, and there is very precise logic to see how this functions and where the basic error is, which is not easy. But just learning about it, hearing about it, one becomes more and more aware of this process. So one tries to withdraw from judging, remembering what one really sees there in the beings as a being is a being that is looking for happiness like oneself, experiencing suffering it doesn't want, no basic difference whatsoever. So this is the kind of attitude we try to generate.
You said yesterday that the best attitude is to look to other people like a mother to his child.
This is also an attitude we try to develop. That's when you think about this process of taking birth again and again. Then remember that this life, our body, and our fact that we have survived as a baby, become an adult, this is primarily thanks to the mother and the parents. So this is in this life. So they are persons whom we owe deepest gratitude. Now, if we get the conviction that one life produces the next and again the next life we need a mother, isn't it? We need a father. Again, somebody to take care of us. We will be completely helpless again, like we were at the beginning of this life. Even if born as an animal, the need for the parents to take care of their kind of upcoming kind, then is the same necessity. So one reflects that there is life after life. One goes back and asks, has there been a first life? The answer is no. There is a beginning of this world, a beginning of every life, but the continuity of mind has no beginning in the view of Buddhism. So which means we have an almost endless number of beings that we have depended on completely. And they're still around us. They go their way, but we will be with those. So all of those that are around us, one tries to understand as beings that we have had very close relationships, very kind relationships. So one tries to develop this attitude. It may not be quite easy, but listening to the teachings of the great masters helps very much to generate this attitude more and more. And then would one be harsh to one's mother? One would not. So this attitude is considered to be a correct view of reality, and then completely changes one's reactions if it becomes a nature of one's thinking, a nature of one's seeing others.
About reality is another important concept, which is vacuity. Could you explain it a little bit?
One first has to understand the process of projection.
Yes.
And vacuity is simply a word saying that what you project is not there. And of course it's much more precise, but the process to understand it is really observing the mind, how it projects, and primarily with regards to one's identity. Now, each of us has a body and a mind. This is very obvious. And how do we perceive ourselves? How do we perceive a person? We perceive another person on the basis of its body. Do we perceive the person directly? Or do we perceive the body and then think that is this or that person? We perceive the body, isn't it?
Yeah.
We don't perceive the person directly. To us it appears as if there is an independently existing person out there. The reality is, we cannot perceive it. We have to perceive the body, and then there comes the thought, this is a person. So the person finally, that what really is to be understood as person, is a name that a label we put on what we see, which is the body. There's not more than that, it says. Vacuity means we think there is something concrete, solid, which is the person, which is not the body, which is not the mind, which is there by itself. If you look for it, we can't really find it, but if we don't look for it, it seems to be there so solidly. Vacuity or emptiness kind of means that is not there, that does not exist. This is a mere projection. What is there is a body linked with the continuity of mind, and then when we perceive the person, we label it. It's just a name we give on the basis of what we see. And all the other ideas of there being such a solid being, what we think is the person, that does not exist. That is a mere projection.
Speaking of mind, we have a powerful tool to train the mind, and this is meditation. How and why to meditate?
The Sanskrit word for meditation is bhavana, and in Tibetan it is gom. This word just means habituating the mind. That means the mind has the quality that the thoughts that are generated again and again become more and more a natural part of the mind. So for example, when a person reacts irritated, whenever something is not at pleasure, then this will create a basis for irritation to come more and more easily. So after some time, the person will become immediately irritated, having habituated the mind to this kind of reaction. That's the negative process. Meditation is the same, but looking for a positive development. Like understanding that irritation and anger is a great fault, seeing how it disturbs the body, the mind, and then understanding that a true cherishing of others, truly seeing them as beings like oneself and developing a deep liking for whomever one meets is a powerful attitude which counteracts anger and irritation. So one tries to habituate the mind to seeing the others that way. Like for example, you go around in town, you see this person, that person, you observe yourself reacting immediately to the visual impression. Oh, no, it's nice, not so nice,
Yeah.
this and that. And then immediately try to remember, it's a being like myself. There is no basic difference. And then see how your mind becomes soft. And then if you should talk to the person, this first projected image will not be the dominating factor, but your understanding, it's a person like myself. So meditation is to train the mind in such a view, in such an attitude, until it becomes a complete natural way of existing of the mind. So it doesn't have to be a process of sitting down in a special corner, ringing bells or this, the other. It's a process of training in every situation, in every moment, by understanding what is a positive attitude and a wrong one, and always trying to enforce the correct ones by remembering them, putting the mind into such a state.
And meditation and mindfulness are very welcome in our world. And Mr. David said yesterday that there are measurable results.
No doubt that any effort to use the mind to generate positive attitudes, precious positive states of mind, will immediately make the mind calmer. The mind getting calmer means that these subtle energies which connect the mind to the body will flow more harmoniously. So there will be an effect on the body which certainly will be also measurable.
What would be a proper way to deal with our ego?
Understand that it is a self-made projection. This understanding, of course, will show that so many attitudes we have with regards to ourselves are just our self-made nuisance. And the clearer this understanding becomes, the more these wrong impulses that come from this feeling that I am important, I am myself, the others are themselves, and all of these distinctions we make, that they're completely wrong. That would be the proper way to deal with it.
And here comes attachments. How is a proper way to deal with attachments? Someone would say it will be okay to longing for things or for development of a person, but attachment brings you back to your ego.
Whenever we encounter something agreeable, we immediately want to have it around us. Want
And
to
have
keep
more.
It. And have more, exactly, and have more. So in us, any agreeable experience or object will cause attachment to arise.
Yeah.
And the link to that is immediately also the view that this is something that remains, that will be permanent, the object will be there always. We don't understand that oneself, as well as those objects, are in a constant change, will all have an end. The connection to them is sure to be ended at one point. And we say, yeah, that's the end of life, and that's somewhere in eternity afterwards or something. So this one has to break through. One has to understand that this human life is very short. And whatever we are connected to, it is absolutely sure that we will have to leave it behind. Even this body that we are so obviously connected to will be left behind, will not go beyond the end of this life. So habituating the mind again to this fact. And this is a very, very important meditation that is nothing else but visualize oneself in the process of death. Like not just thinking I will die, but following these very clearly explained steps of the process of death, imagining how they're happening to oneself, and imagining that how one is only composed of a body which has bones and the flesh will deteriorate whatever you do. The bones won't last so much longer either. And so if you burn this up or do whatever in Tibet, they feed it to the vultures. So it will have its very obvious end. And to look at such pictures, of the end of the beings' bodies, also look at animals' end of their bodies, say, mine is no different. So there is this end. And those that I cherish so much, I find so kind and close to me, I can't even imagine to be separated from them. There is separation for sure. Habituate the mind to that. Then there is a chance to reduce the attachment. It will come immediately, an impulse, but then you remember it's for a short time. Then it becomes more manageable, more normal. It doesn't dominate your whole thinking and your whole behavior anymore.
Looks very simple. But what are the challenges you have met during your teachings to becoming?
It is simple. The challenge is that our wrong attitudes are deeply rooted in us. So when listening to such words, one understands it, one can follow it. Even you can study it very extensively, but to really change the spontaneous reaction of the mind, that is not easy. So for that, it is so effective to listen to the teachings of the great masters, because their words are very powerful. Why? Because they are spoken out of a deep understanding of this reality. And this will help to transform very much. And then it is a question of every day reminding oneself. Like in the morning, remember this is, for example, day number 10,520.
Oh.
It will not come, or it is 15,000. Yeah, 10,500, something like that. Or in my age would be something like 20,000 something. Give it the number it has. Easy to calculate, isn't it? We learned that at high school. So that is day number so and so. And it will not come back. If we blow it, do wrong that day, that one was bad investment. And the results will come. So be aware of that, try to purify what you did wrong. Next day, this is this day so and so. It will not come back. Do good. Remember that your life only consists of so and so many days. There's no more than that. So this way to remember the impermanent nature. Remember also that now as a human being, it is not comparable to any other existence. In Buddhist view, there are 6 kinds of way of existing in general. So very, very unfortunate ones, and even much more pleasant ones than human. But not any of the others are as precious as human. Why? Because in human existence, the mind is very clear. We can understand what is positive and negative. We are not overwhelmed by suffering. We are not overwhelmed by happiness. So we are fairly balanced. And this chance doesn't come often. So every day of human life is extremely precious. So use it. Remind yourself, use it well. How to use it? By remembering the good attitudes of mind, and primarily compassion. That is, see the others in the same situation as you are, many even worse. See that they are not just anybody, they are closely connected to you from life to life. So wish for the happiness, deeply. So by remembering this again and again, and when you see people try to think that way, then it becomes more and more a spontaneous attitude. And then it really changes from deep down. That's the way to do it. There's no other way to do than that. And that's the process of so-called meditation. We always think it's something like that. No, it's an every moment effort, every moment attitude. In every situation where it's possible to remind yourself of your own situation and not just be carried away by the outside. So that way it becomes more and more natural. And then of course, again going back to the masters, listening to their teachings, reading the texts to get new kind of refreshment. That's so important. And then it's not really difficult. Then these old bad habits become kind of loose.
How have you met your master or masters?
I was extremely lucky. That is, the first master I've ever met was Geshe Rinpoche. That's this most exceptional master who was known to have deep, deep experience in all these meditations. His qualities were so extraordinary that even His Holiness Dalai Lama asked him to become his assistant. And one couldn't think of any greater fortune than to meet such a master without having to look for him. So how did this connection come? I was studying in Zurich electronics, and This master was invited by a group of Tibetans to take the position of an abbot of a small monastery close to Zurich, but I had no connection to the Tibetans. So I had a girlfriend that had been in India in the late 60s and was among the fortunate ones to have encounter with these great masters, among the first ones actually to meet this master. And she sometimes talked to me about this great master and said, he is the only one that can explain Buddhism so that we Westerners can understand it. So when she knew that he was coming to Switzerland, and she was informed by her friends from those times and suggested that we go and meet him. Of course, I was happy to do so, and we requested teachings from him. And he agreed, and so it naturally evolved. Then 2 years later, I didn't want to finish my studies because on the one hand I didn't put much effort, so I knew that it's going to be very difficult to pass the exam. On the other hand, I was very fascinated by Dharma. Then I went to the master and asked him, I want to stop studying, I will come here and study with you. And then he asked me, well, how much do you have left to finish your studies? It was about half a year. And he said, once you have finished your studies, you can come, not before. So that was it.
You have to finish your
I had to finish, yes.
And after that, you come back.
I was 22 when I finished, and also thanks to the very skilled way of my mother to bring me to this school. And I thought I was young enough to spend still a few years without working. And I was specialized in programming. It was just a time of upcoming personal computers, so there were big demands for people with my studies. And I thought in 2-3 years there will still be plenty of demand. So first I want to learn Tibetan and learn Dharma, Buddhist teachings from this master. And that's what I did. And then it was so fascinating that 1 year after the other passed.
Which is relation with your master? How often do you meet him? Every day or?
Well, once I knew a little bit of Tibetan, then there was a need to translate into German. It was in Switzerland and Austria and Germany, so many people invited the master. And then I had the chance to accompany him on the travels and translate for him. So I spent a lot of time in the vicinity of the master. And also in the monastery, he founded a monastery in the western part of Switzerland. And there I lived, and he was there also most of the time. So for about 10 years, I was in the vicinity of the master very frequently, or even almost daily.
And it helps.
Oh, this helps a lot. Just the presence, has a very calming effect on the mind. It's their compassion, their deep, deep compassion for the beings. Just being in the presence of them calms not only humans, also animals. They become very soft. And of course, teachings, but not only that. He had a way of just making remarks. And we were always doing something stupid, and also thinking stupid things. And I'm firmly convinced that this master, he saw every thought that occurred in our mind, because all of a sudden he would say, now be very careful what you think. It was just on the point of thinking something stupid. Or all of a sudden he would say something...
Before you think that
before he was just about to come. He would say, now be very careful. Or sometimes he would just make a remark, what are you doing? Swimming in concepts, which just think concepts are just random thoughts. Are you just spending your time swimming in random concepts? You would just say that and look at your mind, yes, that's what I'm doing. So in such ways, and sometimes he would even say something that we could not really relate to. And then in the course of weeks or months to come, one would get into a situation where one would remember this remark. And it were indications of how to behave, how to react at that moment. So he knew what was going to come. There were repeatedly such experiences. Not every day, but again and again. So the conviction that he really knows what's going on in you, what are your potentialities, and this deep wish in him to help you, to guide you to a more positive state. This became very obvious.
This is extraordinary. His Holiness Dalai Lama said that the only thing we need to be happy is our mind. I see here humanism.
Yes.
It is simple to understand.
Yes.
But where are the challenges? Because it's easy to love someone I love,
Yes, yes.
who's pleasant.
Yes.
But I found difficult to feel compassion, maybe, to one who hurt me.
The only way is to change one's view and expand it over the present moment. Like the same being that hates you maybe at the moment, even in this life, situations may change. And that very being may be the one that helps you the most. And that one that you love so most at the moment may change into somebody that you don't want to see ever again. So these things change so quickly. That's one way to train one's mind not to be so rigid with regards to one's views. And the other thing is to see how ugly anger is. Develop a dislike for anger. Whenever anger occurs, look inside, how it disturbs yourself. Whenever you see anybody else in a state of anger, see how the atmosphere in the room becomes disagreeable, scary.
Feeling in the air.
Yes, just the feeling in the air becomes very disagreeable. That's the quality of anger, something very scary. And don't think about the person being angry. Just think this state of mind of anger is giving so much difficulty to everybody. The one who has it in his mind does not experience a moment of happiness while the anger is active. So very deplorable, very sad, and to feel compassion, wishing may this being not be in such an unhappy state. And may I not get into these states. And when you feel it coming up, stop thinking about the surrounding. Stop thinking about that which makes you angry. Stop thinking about the words that you heard that hurt you. Just look inside how it's coming up and try to observe it. The quality of these states of mind is that when you look at them, they lose power. You just observe them, like as if it's not you. You just kind of step back in your way. Don't keep your attention to the outside, draw it inside, and look how it's building up. And then it's it's a little bit like a person that all of a sudden loses its clothes, stands there naked. What will the person do? Will try to get away.
Yeah.
It behaves a little bit like that.
You're trying to dissolve.
Yes, that's the way one way to dissolve it. It needs training. It needs an effort to look inside. But one can get a habit of that. And one may fail. Never get discouraged. We will fail many times. So remember now, today was this situation. And again I got angry. I should have looked inside. Look at it afterwards. Even if it happened, it was a failure. But remember how it came. What were the words? What were my reactions? What were my thoughts? Where was the real point of my failure? And then take an attitude that when I hear something like that again, how I will react. What thoughts I will link to that experience. The positive ones, the correct ones, the way of understanding. And train your attitude in linking that when it's calm. Next time you encounter that, the same failure, but you'll remember more quickly. And one point you will reach the point when the challenge comes, you remember that. And you see it building up, but you are no longer identifying with it. So that way one gains more and more victory over one's disturbing thoughts.
I'm curious, have you been such a calm person before becoming a monk?
Not at all.
Not at all?
No.
Wow.
I was just a usual teenager, very fortunate in some ways, thanks to my mother's efforts to put me in good schools and always providing whatever was necessary. And of course I was very interested in material things. To
Like
have,
we are.
Like we are, yes. And also of course interested in girls. But there was one thing that helped me a lot is that very quickly I was not satisfied. Very quickly I was experiencing the kind of unclean nature of a human body, and it came to my mind. So my desires were quickly leaving, just experiencing the smells of a human body, and I must have a very, very sensitive nose, so I smell things very quickly, and it becomes very obvious when you're close to a person. So, but that's not it. I always thought this is something that brings so pure pleasure. It's not, and then when you touch it, it must be really giving you pleasure, but it's all this hard stuff there. There's bones here. And so
Yes.
slow, this became very obvious to me. So I thought it must be the wrong girl. I get another one. And then, of course, very lucky to meet this one lady that somehow I got entangled more closely, despite experiencing the same problems. But she was very crafty, and she wanted to have a man around her, and she was very skillful and experienced in manipulating that so that I would not run away. And so I was caught up. And about a year later, this great master came. And again, about half a year later, she said, I want to go back to Nepal. I said, but I'm not coming with you. Okay, but I want to go back to Nepal. So she left. Very good, because then I had time to complete my studies. Otherwise, it wouldn't have worked, I'm sure. And then also very interested in financial possibilities, and also this lady was kind of also demanding, like she said, well, you're with me and you should pay this, and I didn't have the money. So it was a good solution. I got a job, besides my studies, of doing communication, operating telexes for companies that were doing speculations at the American stock market. It was highly paid, because you were not allowed to make any error. So it was very easy. Typing was my thing anyway. And so it was excellent setup. I had to study, I had to work, very little time to spend with the girlfriend and spend the money. So at the end of the studies, I had a little fortune. So I had everything by the time I had finished my degree. I had a life together with the lady. I had money, more than I could spend. So,
But something were missing.
How much was missing? Yes, yes. And of course, then seeing the lifestyle of these great masters, and then the thought of death. I read one text of this master where he explains, death is for sure. You can hide wherever you want, you cannot escape it. And thinking about very deeply, and you don't know when it happens. And I remembered my cousin. He never thought he was going to die. He died at the age of 18, and I was 17. And at the time of death, what is of benefit to you? What you had during life, it's all gone. The only thing that is of benefit to you are the positive imprints from your efforts of compassion, of good activities, helping others, being of benefit. And that really kind of stuck in my mind. Especially remembering my cousin. He never thought he would die. And we were very similar, even looking similar. So I thought, I am like him, and see, this is what happened to him. This can happen to you every moment. And that triggered the thought of asking the master to become a monk.
Even in Western psychology, the thought of death, it's used to make a full life.
Yeah.
Not so scary
Yes,
anymore.
yes. It's very wise advice.
And talking about life and death, could you explain a little bit the concept of reincarnation?
Yes, it is not difficult to understand, really. One has to understand that mind and body are two separate things of completely different nature. Body is material, and it starts in the womb of the mother. It is father cell, mother cell that unite, and this fertilized cell is the first cell that is our body. What we have now is just a multiplication of this very first cell. It's nothing else than that. And then there we have mind. Mind is an immaterial object. It is an object that maybe you can think of other immaterial objects like the electrical current, or the electricity which allows cell phones to communicate. It's also something not so easily graspable. So we deal with other immaterial objects. So the mind is such an immaterial object with the specific quality of perceiving, understanding, and having factors among which is sensation, which is driving us all our life. And now these two objects, they unite. And there is a first moment of mind in this fertilized cell. It does not have to be at the moment of fertilization. It can be a little bit after. This state of mind is not like we experience our mind like now, where we can think and so on. It is more like a state of mind in deep, deep unconscious state. And then the cells develop, the mind also develops grosser states. And now what links this material object body with this immaterial object mind? Mind has an aspect of energy, a subtle, very subtle energy. Always an aspect also of movement. Matter is also considered a form of, gross form of energy in Buddhism. Not only since Einstein, but also in Buddha's teachings. So this subtle aspect of mind, which is energy, and that's the bridge between the mind and the body. So that's the way they are linked together. And these links are established in the process of evolution of the body, in the body of the mother. And the mind develops more and more gross states and also channels where these energies flow. So in the full-grown body, there are 72,000 such channels and various energies which are aspects of the mind flowing through it. There are aspects of mind which kind of grasps our outer senses, eye sense and ear sense, and uses them. But that which understands the visual objects is again the mind, on the basis of the sense organ, on the basis of the brain, we can say, and this basis of this whole system of subtle energies. And then we're awake. We go to sleep every day. What happens? Some of these gross states of mind withdraw from the organs. That's the state of sleep. The mind does no longer service the sense organs. And then in the morning we wake up again. Now when we die, it's a very similar process. The mind withdraws from the organs, but also from the connections with the body in every respect, step by step. There are 8 phases of process of death, which are described very, very precisely. And the end of breathing is only the 4th of these 8 phases. Then there are still 4 more. At the end, there is only the most subtle state of mind left, like at the beginning of life. When the first moment of mind occurred in the body, then there is a most subtle state, the same at the end of life. And this last moment of mind has the quality that mind always has. It is existing one moment, producing a next moment. Existing one moment, producing the next one. So it will produce a state of mind outside the body, which is experienced like a dream, similar to a dream. So the person that has just passed away and left its body does not know that it is dead, like we do not know that we dream. And then in this state, these, already in the process of death, these imprints that we accumulated in our mind due to our positive and negative actions, some of the most powerful ones, they come to ripen, like a seed that you put water and earth, and so it starts to grow and produce its fruit. So that way, these imprints start to grow, and then in this dreamlike state, afterwards, they determine our longings, our desires, and involuntarily will push us to our future destiny, which will be, again, a human substance, or a substance of an animal, or a substance of any other existence. And the mind, not knowing where it gets, pushed by these imprints, then gets linked with this substance. That's actual birth, which is at the moment of conception or a few hours later. So that's the cycle of life. There is the possibility to improve the quality of mind of remembrance.
Yes.
And then apparently one can look back to one's childhood, further to the time in the womb of the mother, and then further to these states. But for that it needs a very advanced development of the mind, which of course I have not at all. But following these explanations and reflecting about it, and then of course having the great fortune to encounter the reincarnation of my master, the first master I met. He passed away in 1986, and then also was very impressive to see how he left this existence. And then, according to Tibetan tradition, one was looking for an incarnation very, very precisely. And then there was a young, out of 123 candidates, one finally was chosen, where one was convinced that this must be the person. And I was asked to go and meet him. So the first time I met him he was 2.5 years old, of course full of doubts. I'm a Westerner, I'm an engineer. You don't accept things so easily.
You need proofs.
Yeah, I need proofs, exactly, we need proofs. So I would observe him, and I was impressed, or kind of, but unsecure. And then in the course of events, more and more became very obvious. He was like a child, he was behaving like a child, but quite unexpected remarks he would make, and also his behavior. And more the impression that this really can be nobody else but this master became very obvious. Not only for me, but for many, many other students. Many, many details, very overwhelming. So I slowly lost all my doubts. So that is the most concrete experience that I can mention.
Great. I would like to talk a little bit about Nirvana. Is Nirvana also a state of mind?
Yes.
And how could one achieve that?
The way we are existing now is samsara.
Yes.
That means we have no freedom over our mind, over our actions and our experiences. We are pushed by our wrong states of mind, that is primarily desire and hatred. But these have as a basis an error, like you were talking about the ego. Only this wrong projection can lead to the state of desire and hatred. But this wrong projection is not just a gross state of mind. It is something that's very, very deep. It is also in every animal, in every insect, has the same error. And this produces these wrong states of mind, like hatred and desire, and this then produces our wrong actions, and this produces the causes for the next existence. So that's the way we cycle. So the way to cut it is by cutting this root, which is a subtle type of ignorance. Now the only way to cut that is by logically understanding that it's wrong. So one needs first the understanding, the intellectual understanding of how it is wrong. And this must be done on the basis of a very, very precise analysis. For such a precise analysis, one needs a very stable mind. So one needs concentration. First, one needs to develop a very stable concentration in order to then follow these analyses, which will produce the wisdom needed to destroy the ignorance. But for this concentration, one needs a certain lifestyle, a lifestyle which is following very precise ethics, which will calm down the mind, which then will allow us to develop the perfect concentration, which then will allow us to follow this precise analysis and develop the wisdom. So it is actually ethical conduct, concentration and wisdom, which will lead to the possibility to develop this intellectual perfect understanding of what is projection and what is reality. And this is still not enough. Then one has to train in this perfect intellectual understanding until the aspect of it being intellectual, which is just a thought, which is always based on an image that is created, slowly, slowly dissolves, and it becomes a direct perception of this lack of such an independent ego. And what really is there as a self, just as a projection, as just as a denomination is the word, just as a name. When one has reached the point where this conceptual image has completely dissolved, one's way of existence changes. One becomes a superior being, an Arya being, and for the first time, levels of errors of the mind leave forever. And then this state has to be brought back again and again and trained in the mind, which will eventually lead to a point where all of these wrong views are gone. And therefore the basis for desire and hatred is just withdrawn. And then it just collapses. It does not happen anymore. And that's the moment one has gained complete freedom over one's mind, over one's actions, over one's experiences. And this state of freedom, that is what we call Nirvana. It's nothing else but that.
But in this process, the ego will fight back?
No chance. It's no, absolutely no chance. One has understood in the deepest levels of one's mental activities that it is not there. And once you have understood something in this deepest level, not just intellectually understood, but it has become a nature of your mind, there's nothing there to fight back. It just completely vanishes. There is no more chance for any wrong attitude of the mind. And this changes also completely the way of existing, the interaction of body and mind. One gains complete control over one's body. There is no more suffering, because all experience of suffering is always the result of these karmic imprints. And they're always completely purified. They are no longer there to be active, to create any kind of suffering. So the person that has attained such a state, you cannot harm that person. You can even try to harm it physically. You can even maybe cut off parts of the body. It will be of no unpleasant experience to that person. No suffering whatsoever. No dislike for that person. Or you can be kind to such a person and caress the body and massage it. It will not produce the slightest bit of additional happiness. This person is in a constant state of pure happiness, which cannot be increased by any outer influences, which cannot be decreased by any outer influences. And of course, there are no inner influences left to disturb.
It looks simple.
Yes.
We have a mind, we have a tool to train it, so we are prepared to be happy. Why it comes that so few achieve this state of mind?
Because the wrong attitudes are so deeply rooted in us. And like in our usual activities during life, we never reach these deep levels. You need to have this perfect concentration, which by itself is already a state of existence that we would consider quite supernatural. It is completely natural, but we don't know it. And that is only the tool for removing these errors. So this is not so easy, not so directly available. It needs a lot of preparations. But now we are in a position to accumulate these preparations. And so that's the strategy that we follow. We try to accumulate the causes for another human existence, which has still better prerequisites than the present one, so that we will make more progress. And then maybe another one and another one. And if we manage to do that by requesting the help and the blessing of those who are free from this cycle, then there is every chance, every realistic hope that one day we will be in the position to really reach these deep levels very easily, kind of very naturally. Like at the time of when Buddha was living on this earth, there were so many that so easily attained this state. Why? because they had been disciples of this being in many, many lives before and had prepared it. And our master once compared it to the situation of you have a piece of cloth which is drenched in gasoline. You need just one spark and it will burn. So they had brought their state of existence to such a point, so easily they managed to do. So we are still working on drenching this piece of cloth with gasoline. But now as a human we can do that. We can start.
If you have something to add, maybe a message to our viewers.
Well, if I should give a message, I know that yesterday we had this very pleasant encounter with an Orthodox priest. I must say it was my first encounter with an Orthodox priest.
Yes?
Where we could really speak, not just meeting. And there were many essential points of spiritual life that just in these few moments of interaction I saw they are there. And also whatever spiritual path you follow, remember the most important is always try to create compassion in your mind towards whomever you meet. And also the root of all problems, as he mentioned, is this egoistic attitude. Is that there is nothing positive happening in a mind when it comes out of egoism. I can only confirm this. So look at the egoistic attitude where it comes, try to reduce it, and then whatever path you follow, this will be the essence of a true religious or spiritual path, whatever you want to call it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Mulțumim și dumneavoastră că ați fost alături de noi. Aceasta a fost Transilvania Culturală. Toate cele bune!